All right, we are going to have Mark Moyar here in just a second. He's the William P. Harris Chair of Military History at Hillsdale College. He has a summa cum laude BA from Harvard and a PhD from Cambridge. His latest book is Masters of Corruption. You can follow him on X at Mark Moyar, Moyar. And I believe we're going to be visited by Iyah May, an Australian pop star and physician who grew up in far north Queensland. She had a serendipitous encounter, performed a rap song that got to be viral. And so we're going to talk to her about that. But first, we're going to be talking to Mark about the fact that he was exposing corruption inside the, guess what, NSAID, then became falsely accused of revealing classified information, was fired. Big story there. We're going to get to it right after this.
Our laws, as it pertains to substances, are draconian and bizarre. The psychopaths start this way. He was an alcoholic because of social media and pornography, PTSD, love addiction, fentanyl and heroin. Ridiculous. I'm a doctor, for sake. Where the hell do you think I learned that? I'm just saying, you go to treatment before you kill people. I am a clinician. I observe things about these chemicals. Let's just deal with what's real. We used to get these calls on Loveline all the time. Educate adolescents and to prevent and to treat. If you have trouble you can't stop and you want to help stop it, I can help. I got a lot to say. I got a lot more to say.
I'm excited to bring you a new product, a new supplement, Fatty. I take it. I make Susan take it. My whole family takes it. This comes out of, believe it or not, dolphin research. The Navy maintains a fleet of dolphins, and a brilliant veterinarian recognized that these dolphins sometimes developed a syndrome identical to our Alzheimer's disease. Those dolphins were deficient in a particular fatty acid. She replaced the fatty acid, and they didn't get the Alzheimer's. Humans have the same issue. And we are more deficient in this particular fatty acid than ever before. And a simple replacement of this fatty acid called C15 will help us prevent these syndromes. It's published in a recent journal called Metabolites. It's a new nutritional C15, pentadecanoic acid it's called. The deficiency that we are developing for C15 creates something called the cellular fragility syndrome. This is the first nutritional deficiency syndrome to be discovered in 75 years and may be affecting us in many ways, and as many as 1 in 3 of us. This is an important breakthrough. Take advantage of it. Go to fatty15.com/Dr. Drew to receive 15% off a 90-day starter kit subscription, or use code Dr. Drew at checkout for that 15% off, or just go to our website, drdrew.com/fatty15. I'm really looking forward to this conversation. It should be very interesting. Mark Moyar is, as I said, a PhD from Cambridge. His book is Masters of Corruption. Caleb, if we could throw that up there, you can follow him. Mark Moyar, Moyar. He is. How the federal bureaucracy sabotaged the Trump presidency. There's a lot to be told here, and it's inside the USAID. Mark, welcome to the program.
Hey, it's great to be with you, Dr. Drew.
So when did this all go down, and what did you observe? What was the whistleblowing that you had done?
Yeah, I joined USAID as a Trump appointee in 2018, and I, for several months, was just an advisor there, and then was put in charge of an office later that year. And as soon as I was given that job, I was inundated by complaints from people within the office about all sorts of misbehavior. And some of this was just bad management, toxic leadership, but some of it was criminal corruption. And the most egregious case that I came across was that my own deputy in the office was the chairman of the board of a company that was getting federal contracts. At the same time, he was a government employee and helping that company get contracts through his job, which is a flagrant violation of conflict of interest.
No, you have to marry somebody and have the wife do it, or the husband. Isn't that the way it's done in Congress now?
Yes, it's usually a little more indirect. Or you have your son, Hunter, do it.
Right, and, son do it. Yes.
So
but I'm saying that with my tongue embedded in my cheek. But the reality is that is what is going on in our government. We all certainly didn't know it, and you had a front row seat there. Were you shocked?
Yeah, I mean, and part of it was that how brazen it was. As you said, you didn't even bother using a family cutout, which is how this often happens. And this person had even gotten permission from government lawyers to do this, which was an indication of how corrupt some of these government lawyers were. And so I went to agency officials who were supposed to deal with this kind of thing. And I said, look, I'm new here, but my employees are telling me all this stuff and it sounds pretty serious. And they said, well, it's commendable that you want to raise this issue, but in reality, most people don't bring these sorts of things up. And they didn't really explain why. And I later found out why. It's because you become the target when you do that. But, I said, I came here to drain the swamp. And so we should do an investigation. So investigation goes ahead and things unfold a bit slowly. But to make a long story short, they ended up allowing this corrupt individual to keep his federal job by going to the Department of Defense, where he still works. And this is part of their usual shell game. They can reassign you somewhere to be punishment. And in the meantime, they made this fraudulent accusation against me and then violated my due process rights to get me fired. And I've been fighting ever since. I'm still in court 5 years later trying to get this sorted out.
And is the new administration, and I get in the book is chronicling this, is that correct?
Yeah, the book tells the story up until about the beginning of 2024, when I'd originally hoped to have the book out earlier and the case closed. But part of the nature of this whistleblower retaliation is that they try to string you out because the government has all the lawyers and the money in the world, and they know that you don't, and so they hope to drag it out. But again, it's been in court for 3 years. We spent 2 years trying to get the Inspector General to help us, and that's another huge part of the problem. The Inspector General at this agency, like so many other agencies, is part of the problem, and they're in cahoots with a lot of these bad, corrupt actors.
Did you help direct, say, Elon Musk's or the current administration's attention to the USAID? And if so, if you had anything to do with that, are you going to direct them towards the Inspector General's office?
Well, they asked me to serve in this new Trump administration, and I really wanted to do so, but we have a child with severe health problems, and for personal reasons, I couldn't do it. But the book has been made available to a lot of the people who are making decisions, and so I do think that the Inspector General, the Office of Security is another one. I talk in the book as well, the Office of Security, which it has all sorts of important functions. They're part of the problem too. And so what happened was, as soon as Trump took office, they went to the Office of Security and said, give us your files, and they refused to turn them over. So that's when they started putting people on leave. And so AID has become something of a test bed for what they're doing.
That has, or USAID has? Or is that USAID? Is it all the same?
Yeah, USAID and the problems they've encountered. I mean, I think they first went there because they knew how bad it was, and some of that is documented in the book. And so, also foreign aid is very controversial. So they went there and quickly encountered this resistance, which then made it all the easier for them to justify these crackdowns.
So what happened to us? What's your theory about, is this just the nature of bureaucracies when they get out of hand? Is this a technocracy that has taken over like it has in EU? Is this just bad people have gotten into our government? How do we understand what happened here?
Yeah, well, I think it's a combination of factors. I mean, part of it is bureaucracy inherently is prone to becoming self-absorbed and self-serving, and you can go back in our history and you see that. You also have, I think, in this case, a lot of the bureaucrats. It is a bureaucratic ideological echo chamber. In I think 97% of the employees were Democrats, and so they reinforced their ideological bias. And then a lot of them bought into these ideas that somehow this was the end of democracy, and this was, that fascists were coming in. So therefore, we can do anything we want, basically. The ends justify the means. And then I think also, too, you have broader ethical problems because our bureaucracy, like much of the ruling class, is very secular. They don't have the same sort of sense of religious moral obligations, I think, that your average American does.
What? How do we get out of this? What needs to be done? I mean, I guess that's really the bottom line here is, and other than firing a bunch of people and closing a bunch of departments, it feels more insidious than that.
Yes, well, certainly you've got to find some new blood to take over the leadership. And that was a part of the problem, too, in the first Trump administration, is they didn't actually select some of the political appointees carefully enough. And so, as you said, you do have to purge some of the bad apples, but you've got to find good people to go in there. I think what they're also looking at is converting a lot of these jobs into at-will employees, because most of the agency's employees were unionized, and so it was almost impossible to fire them. And so if you can change that, I think it won't come as a surprise to most people. If you look at teachers' unions, you have the same issue. When you can't fire people, you're not going to get good performance out of a lot of people.
Do you think the USAID will survive this, or will it just need to be shuttered?
Well, it looks like functions will probably be moved into the State Department. And so I think you'll certainly see some of the functions continue. And Congress has appropriated money. And I mean, this is going to be a fight that's coming soon in terms of how much authority the executive branch has to say, Congress, we're not going to spend the money you told us to spend. But I think certainly they're going to have to spend some of it. So they're going to have to find different ways, different people. But again, it looks like the most likely outcome is that it becomes part of the State Department.
Couple of things. I don't know if you saw that Bloomberg story that was thrown up there. Kayla, maybe you can put it up again, about some child trafficking. It says USAID record details child sex crimes, labor abuse, social media threats. What the hell? What is all that?
Yeah, well, that came out. It didn't get as much attention at the time because up until this year, USAID was not getting a lot of attention. But this story dates back a couple years, and what happened was that you had USAID career employees making threats about bombing pregnancy centers and churches, basically radical or pro-abortion activists. And so this was reported to the Office of Security and the Office of Inspector General, the two offices that I tried to get help from, but both of those offices turned a blind eye to this. And so we see that there's this strong ideological bias within these institutions, which are, again, these are the people who are supposed to be safeguarding ethics, and instead they're punishing whistleblowers, and they're turning a blind eye when people are talking about blowing up churches.
Maybe I'm naive, but I didn't think that the government servants, we elected officials, and then the people that are in the government serve our will through those officials, and their ideology shouldn't mean shit, as far as I'm concerned. There shouldn't be a function of a bureaucrat's ideology. They can have their ideology, but it shouldn't have anything to do with their function in the government.
Yeah, that's right.
Don't we need to do something about that?
Yes, well, and of course, they will try to tell you. Now, I will say, having worked there are some people who kind of check their ideology at the door and do what they're told. But there were too many cases in the first Trump term where these bureaucrats surreptitiously are infusing their political beliefs, and they are convinced that they know better than Trump and the people who voted for him. Yeah, so that's why you think I think you see this reaction in the second Trump term. I think first Trump term, they were slow to pick up on this, and it wasn't until 2020 they started to do some things. But now they've clearly realized that the bureaucracy is fundamentally, in many ways, trying to stop them, and so they're figuring out how to change things.
It's out of control. A friend of mine, Dr. Paul Alexander, was pulled aside at a State Department party where they were explicit with him and said, these guys are here for 4 years. They don't run the government. We run the government. He told me that about 2 or 3 years ago, and I was just shocked to hear that. It was so disgusting, so anathema to what government service is supposed to be in this country. Russia, China, okay, I understand. But in this country, No, will of the people, I thought.
Yeah, that's right. And there are cases, if you have really strong political appointees, you can get them under control. That was, again, part of the problem we had at our agency was some of these political appointees, they were there for themselves. They were going to pad their resumes and move on. And the bureaucrats were very good at manipulating them because they would say, oh, you are the most brilliant person I've ever met. You're doing such a great job here. And then they would just let the bureaucrats do what they wanted. And the bureaucrats then go and surreptitiously are pushing their agenda and moving money. I mean, they're very good at saying one thing while doing another.
So I've got a bunch of sort of unrelated questions. One is, how do you go from military historian to this job? And are you back teaching military history? And what kind of military history do you teach?
Yes, well, I got a PhD in military and diplomatic history, wrote several books on the Vietnam War, and unfortunately, in American academia, military history has gone out of fashion. Being a conservative white male is also very out of fashion. It's a combination of those things mean you don't get hired at the big universities that give you tenure. And so spent some time working in military institutions and think tanks. And then when the Trump administration came in, they were looking for somebody with my skill set, which involves, some of it involves getting the civilian and military institutions to cooperate. And so I became the head of the Office of Civilian Military Cooperation. After they fired me, I ended up going back into academia. I'm now teaching at Hillsdale College, which is a great place to be, and one of the few places that still rewards the serious teaching of military history and other forms of history.
And I was prompted to ask about, speaking of military history, about Pete Hegseth. Is he someone you know?
I know him, but not well, but he had endorsed one of my earlier books, which I wrote about President Obama's feckless policies. And he first met him because he was a advocate for veterans in the wars in Afghanistan and Iraq, and was, I think, very rightly calling out a lot of the terrible policies we saw out of Barack Obama. And now, more recently, he's been calling out the crazy DEI initiatives that took hold in the Biden era, and that clearly will be one of his top priorities. But he's also looking at refocusing in the military on fighting and not doing a lot of these silly things that it's been doing for the last 4 years.
And speaking of DEI, I'm reading that let me make sure this is true, had some sort of perp walk you had to do as a female? A privilege walk? What was this?
Walk, yes. Yes, this was another shock to me because I came in February 2018. So this is more than a year into the Trump administration, and they are still putting people through this DEI training. The way that Privilege Walk worked is you're given an identity, so you have to play somebody else's role. So I was a woman of Scandinavian descent, and then I had to answer the questions or react to them as if I was that person. And you had a male French development official, and you had a woman with an unwanted child, and a male prostitute, and things like that. And you all stand in a line, and then they read you a statement. And depending on who you are, you either step forward or you step back. And it's questions like, do people, make negative stereotypes about you, or does the president of the country look like you? And so, at the end, the white guy is furthest forward, and me being the white female, I was second, and then there's various degrees of separation between the people further back. And so it's a long-used left-wing propaganda tool to try to show that everything is about privilege, and that's why some people get ahead better than others. And that's, of course, used to push government, socialist policies that will supposedly eliminate these privileges, because we know it's not anything you've actually done that might get you ahead in life. It's the privileges you have.
I like the way they assume that a white female Scandinavian is some sort of stereotype that they've got pegged. The stereotype. I mean, she could be anything, right? She could be a physicist. Why are they pegging the Scandinavian female?
Yeah, and of course, it also ignores largely ignores class privilege, as if every white male is works on Wall Street and drives a Porsche, and everyone else is impoverished. And of course, no, that's untrue. And obviously, this is one of the big reasons Donald Trump got elected, because Americans saw through the sort of political correct DEI ideology, and especially the working class realized that in fact, people are disadvantaged for lots of different reasons, most of which are not covered by DEI.
From your historian perspective, should we have been surprised that we ended up here? And are there historical examples that help us understand how we get out and what the probability is that we get out?
Yeah, that's an excellent question. I think the closest parallel we have really is Andrew Jackson. And it's fascinating. We teach American history course here at Hillsdale, and we have students read Andrew Jackson. And one of the things Jackson talks a lot about is how the bureaucracy, career government officials become corrupt, they become self-serving. And so he wanted to limit the amount of time they could serve. And so I think that's a point we've now returned to. It's not the only one. And obviously government's much bigger now than it was in his day. But some of these problems aren't new. It's people have pointed out, even Bill Clinton, when he came in 1993, recognized that you had bloated government, and he cut hundreds of thousands of jobs. And so the idea that it's fundamentally new is I think, largely mistaken. I mean, I do think you have very high level of distrust in the government, but that's against something we've seen before. I do think it's going to be a challenge to try to bring Americans together. The Biden administration, I think also the Obama administrations, were among the most divisive, and Americans are now divided against each other. And then you have, when Trump comes in, the people who were doing sort of the most dividing now are crying foul, and things are getting worse. So I do think we will need some period at some point where people will get along better, and we don't have this phenomenon we have where people don't want to be friends with other people simply because it belong to the wrong political party.
Yeah, it was weird. I saw when Jane Fonda the other night, when she got that sort of Lifetime Achievement Award, her thing was, we're just more empathic. We just have empathy. And if you're not woke, you don't have empathy. And I thought, oh yeah, this is it. This is it. You have to, if you don't want to deal with drug addiction, let's say, by giving people heroin and letting them die in their street, you don't care. And if you don't care the way I care, you're a bad person. It's the weirdest thinking. It's so narcissistic. And it's so wrong, too. It's wrong-headed. It harms people. But I don't know how we get people out of that brainwashing they're in.
Yeah, I think it's going to be tough. And I think the left, to a large degree, has kind of invited this on themselves, because they've been, and when they've been in power, they have really been the ones, I think, who have tried to make politics the center of everything, and to assume they know all, and therefore anybody else must be evil in some way who doesn't agree. Right. And that has created, great support for Donald Trump, because he's been willing to push back on that. And but you've got lots of other people now feel aggrieved because they have been the victim of this left-wing intolerance.
It feels like this has been you tell me if I'm wrong from the historical perspective, but like this really feels like it. I started rolling the clock back further when I started thinking about how we got here. I started thinking, JFK, he was making a lot of interesting changes. And no, wait a minute, it goes back, and I think it goes back to Wilson, when this kind of elitist, from on high, bureaucratic, technocratic kind of thing took hold.
Yeah, certainly you can see a lot of the Wilsonian concepts that basically you need this expertise, bureaucratic expertise, and they're going to solve everything because, of course, experts are very smart and they don't have any biases, which, of course, has been disproven time and again. I think one thing that could help move us past is if we move ahead with this sharp paring down of government, I do think what you're going to see is that most of what government does will still work. Now, I think people right now are worried that they're cutting so much that it's going to destroy things. But I can tell you, I was at USAID during a shutdown when most of the employees were not allowed to work, and a lot of the most important stuff was still getting done. And I said, there's good people in government. There's a lot of people who aren't pulling their weight, and so I think if Americans see that, in fact, we can save a bunch of money by shrinking the workforce, and I think also dealing with other forms of corruption. I think entitlement corruption is a huge problem too that should save us huge amounts of money. I think that maybe will get us back to a place where there's more consensus.
Make me feel better. You said there's important stuff they're doing. Can you give an example of something important that they're doing at the USAID?
The most popular program with Congress is what's called PEPFAR, and that is a program to give drugs to people in poor countries to keep them from dying of AIDS. And so that has actually been granted. The Trump administration has, I think, generally been okay with that. And so that program, I think, is likely to continue. There are some things that are actually very much in our interests. When we have health programs that will help us identify diseases in foreign countries before they come over here, or we have programs that will help us detect whether people are trying to come here illegally. And also when we're trying to combat China, there's some things we can do.
All that seems to have failed horribly. I don't know whether it's the flood of immigrants, the COVID. I mean, why do we have those things if that's where we end up? But okay,
yeah,
it just feels like we fund things that we can't afford, and it's unfortunate. Things I think that do sound quite good, but I don't know how we afford these things. I guess maybe I just understand the power of the American government and all those resources we have. The other thing, lastly for me, again, I'm trying to understand the historical moment. When I look at these giant bureaucracies that are failing, I look at sort of Catholic Church in Spain and 17th century. I look at France in 19th century or 18th century, end of the 18th century, and not so great things happen to get out of that, but they happen fast. They tend to happen very quickly. It's like I always bring up Hemingway's description of one of his characters was asked, "What is it like to go bankrupt?" He'd gone bankrupt, and he goes, "Well, it's very slow and then very fast. First it's slow, then it's fast." And I feel like that's kind of what we're dealing with here, based on historical antecedents, but they're pretty intense spasms to get out of it.
Yeah, one thing to keep in mind is that this country was created in a way to restrict the authority of anyone, and that includes the president. So the things the White House is trying to do now are running into opposition from both Congress and the courts. And I think inherently there is value to that. I think we don't want to allow one person should do everything they want, because we may sympathize with that person now, but tomorrow it could be somebody with very different motives. So I think that is going to put some serious constraints. I will say, actually, I've been surprised at how fast they've been able to move, especially with Doge. I think they probably figured they would try to get a lot of this done before Congress and the courts could even react. And they have done a lot, but I think we're going to see in the next at least year and probably more that you're going to have courts and Congress battling with the executive branch over these things, like getting rid of bureaucrats, whether the executive branch can just refuse to spend money that Congress has authorized.
Kind of interesting, and I suppose healthy. But the question I would have that I think worries people, and as someone who's been inside, I wonder what you think of this. I keep hearing people's anxiety coming through that Musk is going to break something. Of course, something's going to be done not great, and they'll have to reverse course. I mean, that's just the nature of what he's doing. But do you worry that something could get broken that would not be fixable, or could have some real dire consequences?
Yeah, I don't think there's probably anything that would be unfixable. I do think there'll be some short-term pain that may be unnecessary. Whether you can avoid that, I'm not sure. But there's companies
you can't listen when you're doing major. It's like trying to be a company. It's like the way they tried to cut in Japan. We don't want to get people can't lose their job. The company's got to keep going. Then they end up in stagnation for 50 years. There's no way to do this without it hurting. And the nice thing, I suppose, the nicest thing is if the hurt gets distributed to all of us. So we just kind of get through this and move forward.
Yeah, and hopefully they will be able to, I think, well, we've already seen some of the funding get restored. When you cut off massive amounts of funding to all sorts of people, there are going to be some people who get hurt along the way. I'm not sure how long that will last. Hopefully the people who get laid off will find private sector employment, or maybe they can get hired back as at-will employees. But it has been the reality for a long time that if you're the kind of person who doesn't want to work hard, maybe the government's the kind of place you go. And so, when you're now thrown out in the streets, it may be hard for some of these people to find gainful employment.
You know what? People have a way of stepping up. They do. I have more faith in people than that, I hope. But a couple last questions here. Does anything keep you up at night based on what you've learned and seen?
Yeah, I still think getting back through and examining all of the bad things that have been going on in the past decade, there's a lot to be done. There's a new story that has just come out about things that were happening in 2015 in the FBI and this honeypot operation to entrap people in the Trump administration. There's so much of that still hasn't been discovered. And it said USAID, there's, I think, lots of stuff, because as I've found, most of the time when people report corruption, it gets swept under the rug. And so I'm hoping that people will have now the time to go in and really dig in and find out what's been going on.
And what's up for you next? Where are you putting your energy other than teaching?
Yes, well, we are commemorating the 50th anniversary of the end of the Vietnam War. Got several big events going on this year, and I'm still right now working on the last of what's a 3-volume trilogy of the Vietnam War, which I think has been one of the most misunderstood and politicized events in American history.
Give me the thumbnail. What do you mean? That's a pretty tantalizing little, drop there at the end. I argue the two fundamental points is I agree. I argue that, for one thing, there was actually a good reason to be in Vietnam, which is not what you most usually hear from the left, and that actually the war could have been won. Now, most Vietnam veterans, I think, would agree in general with me, but in our intelligentsia, those views are out of fashion. And so I've spent a good deal of my career doing in-depth research. I wrote a book called Triumph Forsaken, another one called Triumph Regained, working on the last one now to really disprove a lot of this left-wing conventional wisdom. Did you interview Colin Powell in any of this, the research for this?
No, I have not talked with him. I've been able to talk with quite a few other veterans, although unfortunately now a lot of them are passing on.
Yeah, unfortunately. Because I've heard some just really fascinating things that he had said. Susan, there's something in front of the camera here.
Uh-oh.
So give me one. There we go. Fixed it. And I didn't check with you at the beginning. Do you pronounce your last name Moyar or Moyar?
Moyar, yeah.
Moyars? Mm-hmm. Moyar, okay. All right, Mark, thank you so much for being here, and thank you for your work and service and writing the books. I hope there's more coming, so we can kind of, so much of what happened here needs to be documented thoroughly, so we don't fall, we understand that we don't do this again. That's what I worry about COVID, that there's not enough documentation or enough, investigation, the honest investigation of what happened, or we will do it again. So I don't know. Thank you so much for being here, Mark. Again, it is Mark Moyar. You can find him on X, Moyar. Thank you, sir.
Thanks a lot. Great to be with you.
You bet. Thank you. And coming up, as we said, we're going to have Iyah May. She is a physician who is, I want to hear her story. I want to hear her tell the story because I've read a few versions of it. And she says things like, I questioned what I was doing in life. I felt like a big piece was missing. And then all of a sudden, something happened. And we're going to talk about what that was, hopefully right after this. Oh, there she is. Something happened there. Oh, wait a minute. If there was ever a time to be rationally ready, it is now. I urge you to consider getting one of the emergency kits from the Wellness Company because TWC has 7 different kits that are customized for a variety of situations. Wouldn't be a bad idea to take a look at each, considering, say, what we've just been through in California with the fires. I was happy to have the field kit on hand, and the Contagion kit in particular is suited for what is being predicted to be the next outbreak, or avian or bird flu. Of course, the same experts from the COVID era are freaking out about this potential pandemic, but don't panic. Just arm yourself with the meds you might need if this comes to pass. Contagion Emergency Kit contains ivermectin, hydroxychloroquine, azithromycin, Tamiflu, and budesonide, an inhaler that is good for airway reactivity and tightness, as well as reducing viral replication in the airways. Go to drdrew.com/TWC for 10% off your purchase.
Dr. Drew said the best way to quit drinking is by going cold turkey, and he's a doctor, so why would you question doctors?
Dr. Drew called me unfixable.
We talk a little bit about chocolate, and who doesn't love collagen and chocolate? That's right, Paleo Valley's grass-fed bone broth protein powder chocolate collagen. Our friends at Paleo Valley have gone to extremes when it comes to sourcing their ingredients, and we don't even think twice before adding it to our coffee in the morning. It is delicious. You can serve it just like hot chocolate. It's made from bones, not hides, minimally processed, low in calories, nutrient dense, and it's an essential form of protein, collagen, especially beneficial when it comes to delaying the onset of sarcopenia, the muscle mass we lose as we age. And new variety out, Savory Original, a great base for soups and other kitchen creations. Go to drdrew.com/Paleo Valley for 15% off your first order or 20% off when you subscribe. All right, Caleb, is Iyah there?
You hear that noise, Drew? Is that happening on your side?
Yes, that is. Okay, so let me explain what that is. That is on our side. So our friend Kat Timpf, from Gutfeld, she had a baby and she also has a medical problem, and they are exhausted, and we are making them dinner so we can run it over there immediately after this show. Filet mignon. She's making a steak for her. And if you saw her braising the outside, we couldn't have done that in the oven, huh? Couldn't just.
You have to fry it.
Oh, it's fried first.
Get it brown out.
Okay. So Caleb, that sizzling sound is meat being cooked. And but the other thing is, I don't know if you all saw her tweet, her post on X yesterday, I think it was, but she has some rather serious medical stuff going on top of that. We're going to get her through all that, but she's got a lot to deal with. I mean, just so much. And so we are heading over there as fast as we can to try to help her out.
Sorry.
So my other question, Caleb, other than your question about what the sizzle is Iyah there?
Oh, yes. Here she is.
Okay. Iyah May, everybody. Iyah, thank you. Welcome. I appreciate you being here. Now, I want your whole story, and I want it from your perspective. I've read a few of your interviews and things, and it's just so interesting to me. So you went to medical school, you were a physician, and you felt a little searchy. You were looking around still, things weren't right, things weren't complete. Is that sort of how things started?
Yeah, I went to medical school. I'm still working as a doctor in Australia. And something just drove me to pursue something outside of medicine, and that became music. But lately, releasing Calm Again has just been inspired by what's been going on in the world.
Mm-hmm. And I got a bunch of peer questions for you, because I kind of had a similar feeling. That's what kind of led me to talking on the radio, was like I was looking for some other way to creatively express, being of service or being helpful. Here's your video, by the way, we're playing now while we watch and while we're talking. And one of the things that happened to me early on is I was, I wouldn't even call it criticized, but I was run asunder by my peers, particularly my elder peers. Are you having any pushback from your peers?
Related to my song?
Yeah, just to related to your music career generally.
Oh, yeah, I think a lot of my friends thought I was crazy for the first while. I mean, I am a bit crazy to an extent. And then a lot of my colleagues realized that it's not a phase, and I started putting out more music. And I think a lot of people are just super happy for me and supportive, which is nice.
Because that's good. That to me, that sounds like a generational change. 30 years ago, you weren't allowed to have you couldn't be a performer and a physician. You just didn't do that. And how medicine is sort of, people don't appreciate this. It's kind of at least in training certainly, and certainly in the kind of hierarchical structure at a teaching institution, it's very military. It's structured like the military, right?
Yeah, it can be.
And as such, if you step out of line, private, get back in the troop here. Don't stand out in any way. Just fall in line. And what kind of medicine do you practice now?
So at the moment, I'm doing more holistic stuff. So a lot of mental health and a lot of nutrition and wellness, which is what I like. But the more that music's going on, the more it's kind of taking over, and I'm stepping into that.
And tell me about this one, the video particularly we were looking at that went viral.
Yeah, so the Carmageddon music video, I made it with Bradley Murnane in Newcastle. He's a legend. And we kind of just played around. We didn't have a solid plan for the video. We just went with the flow, and it just came out organically. You can read the lyrics. I mean, I'm sure you have. It's pretty, I mean, it's just a sign of the times, right? It's like the chaos that we're all living in at the moment.
Yeah, yeah. And did I see, I don't know if I actually read this or not. Did you, at one point, were you working with Shaggy? Did I see that somewhere? Is that true, or did I just imagine that?
No, yeah, that's part of the story. When I moved to New York, so I went to New York to do research for a year as a student, and I was totally broke. Like, I took out student loans, I worked in a bar, music became something that I thought I was just going to dabble in, but then I kind of fell into it, and I was doing it every single day, as well as research, on the side. So I'd go to the clinic in the lab in the daytime, and then in the nighttime I'd go out with my friends and do gigs.
I like the way your day job is on the side. Medical research.
I mean, I didn't plan
8 hours a day on the side. It's hysterical.
Yeah. Well. Yeah.
What was the research? Just so we really fill out the story.
Oh, it was HIV and hepatitis C.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Just treatments or transmission, or what kind of stuff were you doing?
Yeah, transmission, and just looking how it was correlated to demographics in New York. So it was interesting. Got it. Honestly, my head was definitely more in the artsy world, and I met my coach and I met some friends, and I just kind of jumped into that world. And the Shaggy part, I actually spoke to him yesterday about this. I ended up at his house in Long Island after I got a ride with an NYPD car, as you do, and to his house, by the way. And he referred me to a coach, Craig Derry, and he's like, you really got to see this guy. He's amazing. And so I did, and Craig changed my life and just instilled this conviction within my heart that I could pursue music as a career. And I think that gave me a lot of strength to break away a little bit from medicine. Because, sometimes it feels like a bit of a cult stepping away from medicine because you're expected to go down this path.
It does. That's right. Yeah. There is a culty quality to it. I agree. I've said that. And you do what you've been told, you do what you've been taught, you listen to authorities, and it's military meets cult. And it doesn't like people that step out of line. It does not know what to do with that. But this was a singing coach?
Yeah.
Singing coach. So Shaggy and I go way back to his very, very first album in the 80s, I think it was, wasn't it? And I was
I didn't hear you say that.
Yeah, he did. And something people don't know about Shaggy, if I remember right, he was either a firefighter or a Marine or something. What was it? Do you know that's right. This part of the story?
Yeah, that's right. That's cool.
And I became a major Shaggy enthusiast right then, and he knew it. And he'll remember in about the mid 90s. Please, if you see him again, bring this story up for me if you wouldn't mind. What's the guy's name? I'm going to think of it. He's a very famous I think he was Jamaican sort of rap artist, and we were interviewing him and Shaggy, and I was gushing at Shaggy. And this guy became enraged with me for not paying enough attention to him and stormed out of the studio. It was the craziest thing. Was pacing around outside like an animal. I don't know what was going on. What's the guy's name?
Jealousy there.
Look up. No, it's Shaggy, a Loveline freak out with a rap artist, mid-90s.
Notorious B.I.G.
No. Oh God, I wish she has Notorious B.I.G.
Oh, I wish.
So
Rock?
what is the future? What is it?
Rick Rock, maybe? I'm trying to figure it out.
No,
but he was
way
on.
back. All right,
I'm gonna keep looking.
It's a really gonna drive me crazy. He's got like two names, but it's sort of ethnic-y sounding, almost Hispanic sounding, if I remember right. Anyway, what is it? Oh, you guys are yelling out names at me. So what's up next for you? What's coming up?
I've got an acoustic version of Carmageddon dropping on Friday, so I'm really excited for that. So
Nice.
keep a lookout for it.
Congratulations.
Thank you. And I've got more music, so I'm just going to keep dropping that and just see where destiny takes me.
Buster Rhymes.
No. He was a much more
There's a guy named
much more Caribbean.
Special Ed.
Much more, Special Ed is Adam's guy. More Caribbean thing. So Special Ed was a character on Crank Yankers. Okay,
He wasn't a
Special Ed.
I wish it was Snoop Dogg, to be honest.
No, it wasn't Snoop. Although we knew Snoop, I know Snoop very well too. We used to meet with him and his spiritual leader, Don Magic Juan. If you've met him, you don't know to look up Don
Sounds
Magic
like
Juan.
a
Everybody, look at his green Eldorado, his sparkly green Eldorado.
Sean Paul?
Was
it Sean Paul?
No.
Now
way back.
I'm going so deep. I'm asking an
95,
AI for
96.
Loveline guest from
Just look up 95, 96 rap artist.
Rappist.
I lost my train of thought, everybody.
Sounds Caribbean. Sean Kingston.
No, you guys. It's okay. I'm going to sit here and I'm going to have to get
We're making it worse.
the big subject.
I'm trying to wrap my brain about who are these people from the 80s.
90s. It's not quite that old, but
Sorry,
but
man.
he was a hit in the 80s. He was a hit in the 80s.
Will I Am, was it?
No, it was before them. You guys aren't going far enough back. Anyway.
Boyz II Men was not one dude.
You met Will I Am.
Once or twice, but way back.
Yeah.
So listen. So people should go
music
together. Get the music at Iyah, which is spelled Iyah, right? Hang on a second. I'm making sure. Yeah, Iyah. Wait, I'm going to make sure where you download the music.
It is a very catchy song.
Iyah. May music. Iyah May music, and you can follow her on, I think, X. Iyah May, and there is kind of a political bent to your stuff, is there not? And is that also going to be part of the future?
Is it political or is it just narrating what's going on in the world and starting a conversation? You know what I mean?
Commentary. Yeah, commentary. Yeah, is that what you want? Is that where you feel good? That's where you want to focus?
You know what? It just came up organically and randomly, and I just wanted to write a song about what was going on with my producer, Danny. And we just sat there asking ourselves, like, what's just like so heavy on our hearts and going on in the world? And now this song has kind of become an anthem for people because it's kind of singing what we're all thinking and have been thinking. And I think that's why, to my surprise, like it's resonating with so many people around the world, is because it's speaking for people who don't have a voice and who felt unseen. And I just want to make sure all my music comes from a place that's real and true to myself. And it doesn't matter if it's political or not, or if it's about, losing a best friend or grief or love or whatever, as long as it's, true to myself. So.
Well, appreciate it. And are you?
We have rights to play the music.
Oh, we can play the music. Can we play and the video too? Can we do a little bit of that, perhaps?
Yes,
Caleb?
I'll get it on.
Let's do it. We will do that in just a second. So why don't you intro it, Iyah? Here it is.
Turn on the news and eat the lies. Kim or Kanye, pick a side.
That's all I can play.
Well,
It's safe.
congratulations. Yeah, that's all right. Congratulations.
YouTube, 500 people on YouTube won't see it.
Yeah. So
It
it's
will
all right.
get stuck in your head. It's been stuck in my head since it came out. So it's an
Love
earworm.
that. Love that, mate. Thank you.
Are you in Australia? Are you? That's the highest
Am
compliment. Are you in Australia now, or are you in New York still?
I'm in Sydney. Yeah.
Sydney.
I want to be in New York.
All right. Well,
I love
listen.
Sydney, but
Well, we'll one day see you here. We are in New York right now, and I'm looking through all the ethnic 95, 96 rappers, and it's getting close. I swear to God, it's getting close. What I'm looking.
I have
for
a
here,
list
but
of
it's not.
10. I have a list of 10 that I've narrowed down, and we'll go over that and see if we can figure it out after we let Iyah go.
It's like let's let Iyah go.
you can let
This
me
is
know
not something
who this is. I'm
I
dying
will
to know
let
as
you
well.
know, but tell Shaggy that I think of him often. I love his music still.
Tell him
It's-
Shaggy's still relevant. This other guy's not anyway.
Oh yeah, this other guy was quickly not so elevated. He had some huge hits, huge.
He had little shit fits on.
Probably was a difficult person. So
Yeah.
All right. Well, if she's curious, you want me to go
Gosh,
down the list, Drew? All right. This
All
is
right,
the
go down the
top
list.
10
All right,
most
go down the
likely list based on the details you gave me from Grok.
oh God,
Because it'd be
Okay.
Coolio, Ice-T,
no, but it's in around Coolio and Ice-T's time. It is around that time.
Oh, cool.
LL Cool
No.
J,
No,
KRS-One.
that's too. This guy was way more island. Like that's why he was on with Shaggy.
Island.
You know, they would make Caribbean. So add Caribbean to the Grok search. So
All right. Let me another round coming
so
up.
Sorry.
Marley's son?
No,
No, he's cool. I sat on a plane with him once.
I put Caribbean in there. Let's see if something like that comes up.
He's probably dead.
It keeps wanting to say it's one. It keeps wanting to say it's one of the guys from Insane Clown Posse because I put in that he was a love line.
No, it is not. I promise it is not ICP. I promise it is
Busta
not.
Rhymes,
Said that.
Wyclef
No.
I
Jean,
already said that.
It's still.
Ooh,
Heavy
good
D.
luck.
I'm not sure.
Mad Lion,
Not
Dougie Fresh.
No, none of
That's
those
hip.
guys.
That's more. These are hip hop. Those are huge hip hop. This is.
I feel like I'm not going to know
Maxi
this
Priest.
person.
What's
Chub
that?
Rock, Maxi Priest,
Oh,
Chub Rock.
I think it was Maxi Priest.
Maxi
It was Maxi
Priest.
Priest. It was Maxi Priest. It was Maxi Priest.
a British Jamaican
Yes.
reggae
I said
singer
M.
known for "Close
Yeah.
to You," big in
Maxi
the early
Priest.
'90s. Maxi Priest. Thank you,
Yes.
Grok.
Maxi Priest, and Shaggy will remember him having a total meltdown shit fit because I was too enthusiastic about my friend Shaggy. So, and by the way, Maxi Priest at the time was a big star. I was delighted to meet him, but I've always been a huge Shaggy fan. So shout out to Shaggy, and I'm glad.
Shaggy's a
I'm so
legend.
glad you
It's
hooked up
valid.
with him. He's a legend, but I dig that he is figured prominently into your career. That's great. I think that's a nice thing. So, there he is. That's
Maxi Priest.
Maxi Priest, right? Yeah, he's a little older there than when he had that meltdown. But all right, Iyah, thank you so much for joining us. Good luck, and I hope you'll swing by again when the new music drops.
No worries. Thanks, Dr. Drew.
All right, thank you so much. Appreciate it. And we are going to put up the schedule for tomorrow, actually. And tomorrow we're going to be Susan is still cooking in the background. Nicholas Hulscher, I was just looking at some of the prep for him. I think he's another whistleblower, if I remember right. He's an epidemiologist, administrator for the McCullough Foundation, Peter McCullough. He has been advancing our understanding of COVID vaccine injury syndromes and the origin of H5N1 bird flu. We're going to talk a little bird flu tomorrow, too, because
Bird flu. Woo!
God knows that is overstated. There was just a New England Journal article that came out while we were on the air here. I sent it to my email. I'm going to read it tonight, what the academic institutions are thinking about this. My glance through the article seemed to suggest that all they're concerned about is animal transmission, and they don't really have any significant concerns about humans, but we'll see about that. And there's all our guests coming up. Gary Sinise is kind of a cool add-on on March 19th. And stay with us. Tomorrow we're a little early. We're at 3 o'clock Eastern, noon Pacific. Is that correct, Susan?
Yes, that's
Okay,
correct.
That is correct. Caleb, that is correct? Okay.
Yep, that's correct.
And then next week we are back in Los Angeles, back in Pasadena, and we will continue from there. Then Susan's show will start up again next week as well. And so we'll see you tomorrow at 3 Eastern, noon Pacific. Ask Dr. Drew is produced by Caleb Nation and Susan Pinsky. As a reminder, the discussions here are not a substitute for medical care, diagnosis, or treatment. This show is intended for educational and informational purposes only. I am a licensed physician, but I am not a replacement for your personal doctor, and I am not practicing medicine here. Always remember that our understanding of medicine and science is constantly evolving. Though my opinion is based on the information that is available to me today, some of the contents of this show could be outdated in the future. Be sure to check with trusted resources in case any of the information has been updated since this was published. If you or someone you know is in immediate danger, don't call me, call 911. If you're feeling hopeless or suicidal, call the National Suicide Prevention Lifeline at 800-273-8255. You can find more of my recommended organizations and helpful resources at drdrew.com/help.